Hello, hello. Welcome to another rant pod. First and foremost, I apologize. I've been AFK a little bit. I went up to just around the border of Canada, did some fishing with the family, had a great time, came back to just a swamped week. So I appreciate the patience of getting another pod out. I did throw up a couple one board, and then a couple other videos. The one we're going to be talking about today is Dr. John Coleman's Conspirators Hierarchy, the Committee of 300. And in there, I haven't finished yet, I'm about 100 pages in. But in there, he talks through, and this, again, keep in mind, was written in 1991, right? 35 freaking years ago. He puts together 21 points, I believe it's 21, of what it might look like for the Committee of 300 to take control and usher in a new world order. So, it's going to be a good one. I'm going to dive through these points. It's hilarious. I threw this board together, and oh my God, is it difficult to compress 21 points of the utmost complexity into 6 minutes. And so, I don't know. I didn't think I really nailed it on that one, but had to get something out there. Also threw out the video on the gentleman with the mask on. No idea. Let's start there, because what the fuck is that? Can anybody eloquently give me an explanation? And I looked up, I tried to see what Fox is saying, tried to see if the White House made a statement, try to see if this guy said anything. Now keep in mind, this is almost a week old now. If I had an interview where the world was saying, hey, why is Cole wearing a mask? Hey, doesn't it look like Cole's wearing a mask of his own face? I would probably say something. And it's just interesting that, you see another picture of the guy and ears are a little different. Maybe it's the angle, maybe it's the lighting. But the prosthetic mask is a new one. And I don't know. I think it's, to me, it can't be a slip up. How many times are you going through makeup and media training and all of this shit to get in front of a camera? And for you to have that just blatantly visible and nobody's going to stop you and be like, hey, by the way, fix your fucking mask. It's weird. It's weird, and I don't trust it. However, I remember seeing Kevin O'Leary, Shark Tank guy, trying to build the 44,000 acre data center in Utah. Horrible. I saw he was doing his little Fox News appearance or wherever he was on from the comfort of his own home in flip-flops. And so, I don't know, maybe they don't have any, actually oversight into what these guests are doing, which is hilarious. There's production studios out there that when you think of Fox News, you're thinking of everybody's in this building, there's cameras everywhere, and that's probably true for the main host, but all the guests, you look like they have that same background on. And in reality, it's probably just them in their office, and it's a remote show. So it's just hilarious how it's not much different than any of these other fucking podcasts and things like that. So yeah, that one's weird. I don't fuck with that. And then yesterday they had a shooting at the White House. That was it's an interesting one. The guy said that he was Jesus Christ. I'll buy it. Yeah. If I was Jesus, I came back, I was the son of God, I would probably try to take out, this administration as well. They're doing some pretty horrific things. So, yeah, apparently he just shot a bunch of, guns towards the White House Secret Service, and they got him. And there's that clip going around of that lady who's like, what is that? No survival instincts, just looks around. Meanwhile, there's literally just gunfire. Not a couple shots. It's a fucking war zone. And she's like, hey, what is that? Do you hear that? It's a lot going on. But before we jump into it, if you enjoy the podcast, send it to a friend. If you are listening on Spotify, rate it 5 stars. And if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe. Otherwise, I'm going to dive into this. Again, if you halfway through, you're like, man, this is fucking crazy compelling. I like rant board. Check me out on Instagram, and then you can always subscribe to the Patreon. If you are a friend of the show, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Nothing came in this time around, so I'm just going to rip it. You know what? Actually, I have gotten this question a lot, and it's one that I've struggled with. Because I think everybody's human and everybody does deal with this type of thing. And it's around how do you stay sane or not nihilistic in a world that is just launching shit at you day in and day out. And it's hard. It's hard, man, especially when you're either passionate or you're interested in politics or in the world as it is today remaining a positive place for the next generation. Because if anybody looks around, it's not going the way that we would hope it went. And, it's like not progressing in any meaningful sense of the word. We're going to leave behind a world that's worse off for, my kids one day and all the younger generation that's coming up right now. I mean, I can't imagine being in college right now, spent 4 years to 8 years on a degree that's likely going to be meaningless as soon as AI starts to really ramp up. It's scary shit, man. And then what happens? Tim Dillon talks about how it's all going to be like white collar consultants out there that are homeless and like stabbing people. And it's not far from the truth, man. So in order for me personally to try to tune out the noise, and I'm blessed. I'm truly blessed. I have a beautiful wife. I'm fortunate enough to had a pretty good year and bought a house when I was able to. I look back at that as how blessed I was to just scrape by, have a beautiful wedding, have a gorgeous house. It's nothing like to brag about, but it's 4 walls and a roof and my own property. So, I'm blessed in that regard. And I know a lot of people don't even have that. So what helps me is just knowing what I do have and trying to remain grateful for the things that I know a lot of people don't. And there's always going to be that next step up where you're envious or you call it greed. I want more. I want something better. I want a better car. Well, somebody wants a car, right? Like, so it's trying to keep that relativity in mind that everybody has that one person they look up to, and that means somebody's looking up to you. So keeping that, it's front and center of gratitude, but also making sure that I can like disconnect and surround myself with good people. Because if you are isolated, if you don't have that community around you, what I recommend is you find it. Either go to church, open yourself up to being, somewhat uncomfortable in situations to say, hey, like, I'm looking for new friends. Like, can we be buddies? You know what I mean? Like, because unless you actually put yourself out there, unless you take that first step in order to be uncomfortable, to be vulnerable, you're going to continue to be isolated. And that's the worst thing that you can do, especially right now. So find some community. At the end of the day, church, going to the gym, yoga class, any sort of hobby, club, get in there, find people who share your similar interests and put down those walls. Let them know who you are. Then third and fourth, and probably the most important, is get outside, dude. Touch grass. It's such a cliche, but for real, get out there. Just look around, because everything you see on Instagram, like, I have such a bad habit. I know it's such a bad habit, but I wake up every fucking morning and I look at my phone. I scroll on Reels, and it's not even like my algorithm's good. It's just something. And it's just, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to just sit and stare at the ceiling. So I sit and stare at my phone and I waste a half hour and I start my day off in like the worst, most unproductive way. And so now that the weather's getting warmer, I can get some sunshine in the morning. I'm going to really try hard to not look at my phone in the morning, get outside, wiggle my toes in the grass, get some sunshine on my face, have a tall glass of water, right? Flush my system. But again, when you do that, you surround yourself with what's present, with what's immediately around you. And the nature is actually, it's a medicine in itself. You hear the birds chirping. You see that like everything is still going on, even though maybe on the other side of the world, there's a lot of fucked up shit going on. Or maybe in Washington, D.C., there's some plotting. But immediately out your front door, if you're blessed to be able to not be in the concrete jungle, you have some trees, you've got some birds, you've got neighbors that are doing their own thing, right? So take your time, go for a walk, get some fresh air, go to the gym, get a workout in, try to do something difficult so that the worst part of your day is not understanding that the world is falling apart. So yeah, I mean, I know that was a long-winded answer to a question that I got via DM, and by the way, I'm fucking open to DMs, everybody. Just don't send me reels. I'm not going to watch your reels. I'm sorry. There's too much. But if you want to send me a couple questions or reach out, I'm always open. So without further ado, this book is called, I know it's kind of backwards unless it flips on the other side of this, but Conspirator's Hierarchy, The Story of the Committee of 300 by Dr. John Coleman. Now, I just want to preface by this author, he's clearly jaded, right? So like he wrote this in 1991. And there's some opinions in here that I don't agree with, right? I don't condone everything that he was like throwing out there. Like, for instance, he's super anti-gay marriage, anti-rock music, which is just a sign of the times. Like, it's the 90s, like early 90s. And he was probably an older gentleman there. So I just want to say, like, we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Like, he has some really insightful, visionary-esque type of observations, and I haven't flushed out all of his claims yet. I mean, like, if you just see, I have it all highlighted here, but he's really tying together who's pulling the strings from, like, Henry Kissinger and all of the shit that happened with George the First Bush in office in Iraq, and some of the just horrific things that we've been doing. The only reason we know now that, like, we're a part of a genocide is because it's public and it's on the internet. Like, we've been doing this shit for a long fucking time, everybody. Like, it's nothing new to us. We've just now gotten caught. And it's unfortunate. And it might, like, give you some ideas into the psyche of, like, Trump, of why he's so, I guess, maybe nonchalant about it. Like, because it's nothing new for a president to do what he's doing. It's just that now more people are paying attention, especially as you start to see $5 a gallon, right? Like, when you're not doing fiscally well, when the economy is not rewarding you, that's when you start to look around and be like, hey, why is this happening? What the fuck is going on? Who's in charge and who's letting this happen? And you see comments like Trump saying, like, he's not concerned at all with the financial status of Americans as he starts to negotiate a deal in Iran, like Iran, everybody keeps yelling at me. But it's emblematic of the fact that, again, we are not a part of this conversation. We, the people. Right. And so, yeah, this gentleman here starts to point out some really interesting things, naming people, naming secret societies, the Club of Rome, through to, like, the Committee of 300, through to even all of the nonprofits and the USAID type of shit, USAID, and all of their government, loopholes in order to spend money on shit overseas that the CIA can't do, right? So he's, like, way ahead of the time. And the best part, let me just say this, we're going to get to one of these points, but the best part is the fact that this guy is, like, trying so fervently in the book to convince you that the government can gather information on you and that your private life is not private. And he's like, just wait, they're recording your phone calls, your landline phone calls. And it's like, bro, like, oh shit, the fact that, like, we've moved so far as a society to just be like, yeah, of course they're collecting every ounce of data that they can on you, to having the perspective of somebody 35 years ago saying that this is, like, unfounded and that, yeah, right, like, Americans aren't being tracked. It just shows you how far they've moved the goalpost and how much they've gotten away with, that we just completely let them. Yeah, so the first point, and this one's interesting because, like, it really bleeds into, I don't know, call it Project Bluebeam, or what I like to reference, and a lot of people fucking getting mad at me on this one, was the number one, I'm going to read it. A one world government, new world order with a unified church and monetary system under their direction. Right? So it says, not many people are aware that the one world government began setting up its church in the 1920s, 1930s, for they realized they need a religious belief inherent in mankind to have an outlet, and then therefore set up a church body to channel that belief in a direction they desired. So he's making the point that they understand that in order for them to really have control, they need to channel that religious fervor or belief, or that inherent need for humanity to worship a god to somewhere. Now, you can see that from 1990 to 2026, the amount of people who are not religious at all, it was 6% in 1991, is now 28% in 2026. That's not no religion, right? So here's my thought, and I think it's science. Now, I graduated studying a general biology degree, right? Like, I fucking love microbiology. I love the study of anthropology, of evolutionary science, of, like, all of this shit. And I think it's super interesting. However, it is also the perfect outlet for religious beliefs. And you can see that in the fucking comments where I was like, yeah, this could be science. People are like, what are you fucking bullshit? This is not science. Science, data and facts. And yeah, it is. You're right. It's also a way to discredit things that we can't explain, right? Like, we're never going to be able to quantify consciousness. We're never going to be able to find the right data to describe an after-death experience, or, you know what I mean? Like, you're so easy to manipulate when you can control the data. And that's the same shit that you saw in COVID. You saw how like Bill Gates is giving that interview with a book behind him that says like 10 ways to control people through the data or whatever the book title was. But like again, in COVID, how many people praised like Fauci as essentially like their messiah who was coming to save them, who was offering them their guidance they would take without question, right? It is a religion of sorts. It's not a religion as you go to church. It's not a religion as you worship. But it is a religion that it's asking you to have blind faith in things like the theory of relativity, the theory of the Big Bang, the theory of gravity. Like, these are all things quantum physics. Like, yeah, we still don't know how that works, right? But you have to, like you're trying to piece all this shit together. And at the end of the day, you're taking these leaps and bounds in order for things to make sense from a scientific perspective, the same way that you would make leaps and bounds for your brain to make it work from a religious perspective. So I think that this is probably the most likely direction, and you can see it from the World Economic Forum. They're pushing science-based changes, right, where they can have data to prove the reason they're doing these things. Whether it's climate change, to say like, hey, the carbon monoxide in the atmosphere is causing this, this, and this. We can prove this through data, so thus we have to put a carbon tax in order to reduce that. And again, that could be the case, right? But it's not the goal. The goal is control. And it's what's the best modality to achieve that, and how can we have people believe in that? And so like when you think of that channel of belief, if you can prove it out through science and data, you can make an ancillary or adjacent point that could be correct. But again, it's not the motivation. The motivation is what's there. It's the intention. And the intention is to take control. Is to throw a carbon tax on already expensive jet fuel and plane rides, right? Like, imagine if the Strait of Hormuz stays closed and you start to see jet fuel go up even further, 50% more. And now your plane ticket to Phoenix, Arizona is not $400, it's $700 each. And then they throw on like a 15% carbon tax because, well, we have to make sure that we're accounting for our carbon footprint. Now, all of a sudden, you can't travel. Now, like, what happens to these airplane, or these, fucking no, airplane. What happens to Delta? What happens to United? What happens to American? What happens to Spirit Airlines? They close, or because they don't have the amount of money coming in, the prices rise more, right? So when you have this like game afoot, and you start to see like on the horizon of Prospera and Honduras, and you start to see like these 15-minute cities, the things that they want to build in fucking Lahaina after the Maui fires, like they are curating the future for you. And again, it all comes down to either your convenience or it comes down to science, and they want to ensure that like, oh, you don't need to leave your 15-minute city because guess what? Everything you need is right here, dude. So like, just stay within it. And if you leave, we're going to have flock cameras like track your license plate and make sure that we can pull you over. So when then that other flip side of number one, like this is why I can't do it in 6 minutes, everybody. And the flip side of number one is the monetary system. And then you see the central bank digital currency, and it just like, again, 1991. And he's like, we're going to have a global monetary system. And I can't put myself in that position. Like, if I was born in the 60s to understand, like, by the year 2026, we might very well have a global currency. Now, you look at something like Bitcoin. Now, I think there's some like discrepancies with how it was proposed initially around decentralization. And then you see in the Epstein files, he's had his fingers in there for a long, long time. And then you see like just governments buying him up, like, you know what I mean? So I feel like it started with a good passion and a good intention, and then, or maybe not. And then it was co-opted to then be something similar to a controlled currency that could travel across borders. Now you see the same exact thing with the actual central bank digital currencies. You have banks that are, centralized throughout the entire globe that anytime they're not, or established a bank in that one country, call it Venezuela, call it Iran, call it any country that we've gone to war with in the last like 20 years. That's where you start to see like all the fingers pointed at, so that eventually we can get to a state where every country on the globe is kind of on that same page of central bank digital currency, tie it to your license, tie it to your facial recognition, tie it to your social credit score, and you enact something similar to what China's doing. So And again, like, it's a social contract, right? Like, I heard this argument. We wouldn't go for it, right? If you try to establish a social credit score here in America, like, it's against our very nature. But you look at what's happening in China, and you like understand that, like, up until the 70s, they had just famine and like murder and like no manufacturing base, and shit was bad. And then you look what's happened since. They've essentially, and they're okay with it, they've traded their individual privacy for a functioning society. For lack of a better word, like, you look at our big cities, it's dirty, there's crime, there's no investment into infrastructure. And then you look, it's the exact opposite in China. And so it's their social contract. Like, again, if what they're doing anyways here, Palantir, through to X key score from the NSA, into Gotham, into these flock cameras. And then you add on the fact that, like, you can see people visually losing their jobs from speaking out and things like this, right? So, like, I mean, they're doing the exact same thing here, except we don't have the benefit of having investment into our infrastructure and having, like, a functional society. So, yeah, I think that's likely where that's heading as far as a global monetary system, which is just interesting that he picked that out in 1991. Number 2, the utter destruction of all national identity and national pride. So this one is interesting because, like, immigration can be a great thing. It can offer somebody a new chance at life, a refugee. I have family members who help place people from horrible situations. I'm not opposed to that. Like, do it the right way, obviously. But also, there is some level of what happens when you start to flood immigrants into a small country like the UK, like Ireland, like France, like Italy. Like, we love these countries because of their heritage, because of the families that have lived there for thousands of years and have spoken that language and have made that type of food and have that type of culture. That's why we like to visit those places, because we want to experience that culture. We've always been a melting pot in the US, so we really don't have that. But what you can see in a lot of these countries is just mass immigration, whether that's climate refugees, because yes, like, some of these near equator spots are getting hotter. That's a fact. It could be a number of different things. I saw that Iran had rain for the first time in 20 years after they destroyed a facility, so potentially there could be some manipulation there. But whether it's weather refugees or war refugees, plenty of that going on. There is an increase in immigration worldwide. It's going to destabilize job markets. It's going to destabilize the housing market. It's destabilizing culture, right? And then you think of culture as a direct reflection of national pride. I know in the year 2000, right, like, we had a freaking 90% extremely proud to be American right after 9/11. And that makes sense, right? Like, everybody had that coming to God moment of, like, fuck, they just fucked with us, man. Like, throw up that American flag. And then we were propagandized into a 20-year war where we murdered millions of people. Like, and what did we get from it? As soon as we left, the Taliban took all of our equipment and took the Afghanistan back over, right? So it's like, we get all of these wars around we flood then the people we are at war with into the countries like ours where they don't like us because we created a war-torn country in their, home. And it's not even maybe we're directly related. It could be things like destabilization of regimes or coups, so that then all of a sudden it's just chaos and there's political war internally. And so, I mean, there's countless examples of this. And then again, it's the national pride. Like, you look at 2026, and I think it's down close to like 40% of extremely proud to be American. And how many of those people are like 75 plus? Because I guarantee you pull 90% of like Gen Z or younger millennials, and they are not proud to be American. Like, we've lost the luster. We've lost that, like, the shield of not knowing what the fuck we're actually doing across the globe. And now it's just in our faces. And especially when you get a guy like Trump who doesn't try to hide it. He doesn't try to lie, which, I mean, there's a good thing about that, is like, you kind of get what you get, but he's also telling you how it is, and he's telling you all the things that, like, make you like, what the fuck are we? What are we in the world stage? So yeah, I think you're seeing this across the globe. Utter destruction of all national identity and national pride. Number 3, the destruction of religion, and more especially the Christian religion. I think it was the open doors world something where they have 365 million Christians that are in high persecution across the globe, mostly in like Nigeria and other African countries. But like, one thing that I am thinking of, and this is gonna, I don't know, this might sound crazy, but like, we're hearing Bibi Netanyahu talk about boots on the ground, right? Israel does not have necessarily the fighting force, especially as they have this war with Lebanon on their northern border, and they're the size of Maine, right? So keep that in mind. They don't have the fighting force in order to send boots on the ground in Iran. So Iran, fuck. And so then it calls into question, like, who's going to do that? And obviously the answer is us when we start talking about a draft where Ed Galreen, Thomas Massey, who... That's another fucking story, man. I'll just summarize it quick. $30 million from pro-Israel groups into this guy's campaign, who didn't do a single debate, didn't do any public speaking. The only promise that he made was that he's going to have a fucking draft. So it's pretty clear that, especially Thomas Massey, like, what a stand-up guy. I don't agree with everything, most of them, but he was the only person fighting tooth and nail to get the names unredacted from the Epstein files, hand in hand with like Ro Khanna, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who also found herself exiting. But it's just unfortunate that like you get one guy who's super anti-war. I don't want to send money that we need to foreign countries, not even like specifically calling out all of the atrocities that are happening in that from that country rather, and he's ousted. And so yeah, I mean, then you look at the guy who replaced him, and he's calling for the draft. You start looking at May 10th, I think it was, Bibi going on 60 Minutes saying that we need to have boots on the ground to finish the job, get the nuclear enrichment of the country. Like, bullshit, fucking bullshit. Honestly, it's so stupid and annoying. So my theory here is that we're gonna be the ones to go and fight that, and guess who's a majority Christian country, right? So it's like, how can we throw all these people in a meat grinder? And that's it's unfortunate. And I'm actually really curious. I don't really know the answer to this. I'm going to look this up real quick, but I'm wondering specifically in Ukraine, what is the most common religion? Because if it's Christianity, it's Christianity. Now look who just got sent into the meat grinder, and especially against Russia, who's also a Christian country. So, I mean, how many countless lives have been lost? And how many of them are Christians? And so, I don't know. I mean, like, you not only see that, but, like, they haven't done themselves any favors with some of the co-opted pastors or priests and, some of the issues they've had with child molestation and stuff like that. I mean, it's no joke. And there's plenty of people who have covered for and have sent convicted pastors to new churches to do it over again. And so it's sick, it's disgusting, but I also think it's been, again, co-opted. Like, I don't know exactly how deep it goes, but you can see for sure in Turning Point Faith and all of their pastors are just like neocon, military industrial complex shills who use God and Jesus in order to push their agenda. And it's sick. Again, Erica Kirk, just an emblematic figure for how you can use and abuse religion to your extent. Now, that does not mean religion is bad. It means the people who are using that religion is bad. And again, what a better way to destroy religion than to send somebody to just discredit the entire movement. So number 4 is control of each and every person through the means of mind control and what Brzezinski called technotronics. Now this, again, he wrote this, Brzezinski fellow, he wrote a paper called Technotronics, which has just been adopted since like the 80s into a lot of what the White House and government has been doing. And the idea is to use robots, essentially, to monitor people. Like, 1991 was the first mobile phone call. Like, the World Wide Web in 1991 was initially created. The internet as we know it today, like having a website, was created in 1991. How could you have the foresight to understand that 35 years from now, you're going to have AI, you're going to have the surveillance state, you're going to have the capture of everyone's information, data, you're going to have Facebook initially being, I can't remember what they called it, but it was definitely a CIA opportunity for people to just self-report on their day, on their lives, on their entire being as a person. And then the day that it ended as a CIA operation. The next day it was founded as Facebook. Like, all of this is in order to capture your data, capture who you are as a person, and then slowly manipulate you through algorithms for control in order to push you towards certain narratives, in order to shield you from others, in order to make you hate the other person that is the same as you, who wants the exact same thing as you, except who's been exposed to different information, and thus they think the problem is different. Now, I would say that's control, but however, you can also get there through things like Neuralink, which we haven't seen yet, but the brain interface. That one freaks me the fuck out, dude. I don't know, like, you think of all of the amazing, wonderful future positives that could go with something like that, curing blindness, curing paralysis, being able for people who are paraplegic to use their minds in order to surf the internet. Like, there's a lot of good things, but it's always shrouded by a cloud of what could be, and every time there's something that could be, it happens. People take advantage of those opportunities. So yeah, he said that it would create human-like robots and a system of terror besides which Felix Dzerzhinsky's Red Terror would look like a children at play. I'm not familiar with that passage. However, human-like robots, AI. Like, how, I think it's like somewhere around 60% of all traffic on the internet is AI now. 60% of all new music that comes out is AI. It's interesting. It's a weird fucking dynamic. So then you go into number 5 is an end to all industrialization and the production of nuclear generated electric power. I think we haven't had a new nuclear power plant. I think it was from like 1980 all the way through 2013, and after that our older ones had to start being decommissioned. Meanwhile, China's had like 27 plus new nuclear power plants. And it's all because of like 3 Mile Island. It's all because of Chernobyl and some of the propaganda that went around that they're not safe. But yeah, there was freak accidents. However, those are also a long fucking time ago. Don't you think like the car has gotten safer? You know what I mean? Like, and it's our one opportunity to have clean energy that we desperately need right now, especially as you see the energy requirements for some of these data centers, which again, it takes a long fucking time to build a nuclear power plant. So like if we were doing this maybe 10 years ago, we would be in great straits, right? No pun intended. But we haven't. And I think that's by design. And that's exactly what Coleman is referring to as the production of nuclear generated electric power. But the post-industrial zero growth society is interesting as well, because then you saw the gutting of American manufacturing and the sending overseas to cheap slave labor, which is essentially what he says. And he also says exempted are the computer and service industries, right? The two industries that just so happen to continue to grow like wildfire is the service industry, making sure that the wealthy have whatever they need to have fun, and even like us, right? Like you go to fucking Orlando or Disney World and all that shit. And then and you know what, here's a thought. Maybe the service industries are also continuing to evolve and maintain their prosperity in order for us to continue to have distractions, right? Because if the services are there, why the fuck are we questioning anything? Remember when the whole world shut off because of COVID, and then like in that 3-month period, you know how much information I gathered because I was bored? Like there's no sports, nothing going on. I dug and dug, and I found all of the shit about Bill Gates and about these fucking mRNA. I don't trust them. Everybody's mad at me, but I don't. The whole thing seems like it is either a test for a new or future pandemic, or it seems like it was a fear tactic in order to get you to take the actual problem, which I know there is plenty of issues that have come from those jabs. But the end to industrialization. So thinking back to the Detroit situation where they were fucking killing it, one of the biggest cities in America, and then all of a sudden they got gutted and it fell apart real quick. And that happened in a lot of different spots. But the idea is that it would export the labor to countries like Mexico or China where abundant slave labor is available. And then you have a bunch of unemployed people who either then turn to drugs or alcohol and are disenfranchised, and then because of that, again, they struggle to start a family or be able to take care of a family and things like that. So all these things are downstream of hollowing out our manufacturing base and becoming a net, importer. That might not be true. We might still be a net exporter, but it just depends on what you're talking about. But back to the national pride thing. Like if we were able to continue to still create blue jeans, right? we would be proud to see our blue jeans around the country or around the globe. Those are American jeans. That's America's ass, right? So, number 6, legalization of drugs and pornography, 1991. Like, before you could easily just access it on your phone, right? 1991. Before OnlyFans, before cam girls, before Omegle, before chat roulette, before all this bullshit about the depravity being so easily accessible. And again, I'm not a dude. I'm only human. I've partook, right? It's just what it is. I think the Pornhub, I'm pretty sure, has had like 5.5 billion daily users, like, or annual users rather, each year, and it's like growing. So again, like, this is something that's America or the globe's dirty little secret that nobody wants to talk about, but it absolutely is contributing to this pandemic or epidemic of loneliness, where the incel crisis of men who, spend all of their time watching this shit, who never actually talk to women, who then when they do experience something similar, they can't necessarily like piece it together because it's like unrealistic expectations for what sex is, or relationships are. And so it's not good for anybody. It's really not. And there's, who has pushed all of it. Not going to say it. You know who it is. The same people pushing gambling. It's the same people who are pushing poly market. So then you look at the drugs. And I would say, again, like, I smoked weed for a long time. Like, I'm not opposed to somebody who likes to smoke weed. But you also have to recognize, if you are that person, you can easily fall in a trap that it mutes you. It makes you more docile, right? It pushes you in a position where if you've ever read Brave New World, Soma, like a gram a day takes the pain away or whatever their slogan was. But it's an interesting thing, right? Like, I think there's a lot of benefits to it, but it's also a lot stronger than it used to be. And I always see these funny videos. It's like smoking when you're a kid and you're just having a great time, and then smoking now, you're just panicked and anxious. And not everybody, but some people, expose themselves to like some serious issues. So I say I'm all for it, but it should be regulated, and it should not be in the hands of kids, because I don't know, the way that it is today, it's a lot different. The drug use in large cities as well is fucking ridiculous. In Philadelphia, they got the fentanyl going on, you got Skid Row, you got needles everywhere. It might as well be legal, right? Like, who are we fooling? So I think he hit the nail on the head there. Number 7, depopulation of large cities. Now, this one did not materialize, right? I think there's 2 different lenses you can look at it. His perspective was that he was going to represent something that happened in the Pol Pot regime in Cambodia, where essentially they had driven out their population by force, and then either they starved in like the desert or whatever, or they were murdered. This has not happened in the U.S. I don't know exactly if it's happened in other places. I know that large cities in Gaza were depopulated. But maybe the lens you could take is during COVID, you started to see remote work, which then pushed people to get out of the city. Like, then they don't have to do any sort of commuting, spend less money on gas. Everything else is less expensive. Housing costs are less outside of the city. So that could be some form of depopulation, just cost of living, etc., and probably the crime tolerance, etc. But no, that one didn't really materialize. Number 8, suppression of all scientific development except for those deemed beneficial by the committee. Especially targeted is nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Iran. Particularly hated are the fusion experiments presently being scorned and ridiculed by the committee and the jackals in the press. So fusion technology is interesting because there was a big movement in the 50s, I'm pretty sure, 50s, 60s, and then it just quiet up until recently. So now there's a lot of movement towards fusion again because we need energy to power AI. So it's not necessarily because they want you to have more efficient and cheaper energy. It's because they want to be able to find a way to grow and grow. Some capitalistic nightmare bullshit. And did you see the story about the data center that was rejected 4-1 from this really small rural town? They were only worth like $1 million GDP, something like that. And the developer sued the town for 30 times, whatever that was. And they lost. They had to settle, and they're building the data center anyway. So it doesn't fucking matter what you say. It doesn't. We already talked some about the nuclear. Everybody keeps saying nuclear. That's me. I say nuclear. Everybody's saying I say it wrong. As nuclear. All right. Number 9. caused by means of limited wars in the advanced countries and by means of starvation and diseases in third world countries. Now, this is something like 50 million people have died from AIDS in third world countries. And I don't know. The whole AIDS thing is weird when you look into it, especially when you look into Fauci's hand and how they treated it and some of the issues that they had with that treatment. And also when you look at like the media coverage of AIDS in general, because like I don't know, like, when I look back at old coverage of things, you can't help but understand now that it was all curated. And so it's like, was the hysteria driven due to them wanting it to be driven, right? To push maybe homosexuality, or being against homosexuality. God, I'm fucking having brain farts. Or was it completely organic and it was just came out of nowhere? But AIDS killed about 40 million people overseas in third world countries into Africa. And if you believe the COVID numbers, those are upwards of like 20 to 30 million, which, again, back to like, what is history until you actually were experiencing it and could maybe reference what actually happened versus what was said to have happened. They call them, though, the useless eaters. And now the limited wars in the advanced countries is interesting because that shows, for example, what we've been doing for the last 20 years in the Middle East. It's like, how many Americans can we go out and do some horrible things or get Americans killed? And again, it's not great for anybody, but there's a lot of death that's happened, like 4.5 million attributed to that, like 40 million displaced, which is not good. Number 10, to weaken the moral fiber of the nation and to demoralize workers in the labor class by creating mass unemployment. Wow. Zero growth post-industrial is like one of those aspects, but I think of AI. Like, the demoralization that everybody's going to feel in a year or two when, I mean, they're already feeling it, right? Like, the new grad unemployment, I think, is at record highs. It's like, how are we supposed to do anything when you have AI that's taking over everybody's roles and jobs? And, you can look at the universal basic income potentially, but that's, again, leading back into the central bank digital currency, social credit score, things like that. You don't want the government to be able to turn off your income. So it's definitely demoralizing. And the whole thing here is that it would push people to opiate, to drugs, to alcohol, and in my mind, gambling. Like, how many young adults can't afford a house or a large investment? So they go out there and they buy a fancy watch. So they go out there and they spend $500 on a parlay. So they go out there and they do all these things to have that kind of like immediate high of being able to do some things like, that cost money, but not the ones that matter because it's so unreachable. So he talks about the Aquarian conspiracy in cahoots with demoralization, and that essentially is when you start to introduce the newest generation to kind of an Overton window shift of what's acceptable. And the example he gives is actually compelling. Now, I'm not all of like rock music is the devil, but it is interesting to see the whole like change of language around that time. I think, without pulling the passage, it was when the Beatles came to America, essentially. Before then, there was never a word for teenager or cool. And these were all words that were created along with the Beatles in order to start to spur like a new generation, a movement that would separate itself from the prior generation. And it's interesting because like as quick as technology moves, culture moves quicker. And if you can start to kind of create that gap with the elders and the new up-and-coming generation, you start to then have some infighting, but you also then start to be able to curate what that generation grows up with and then will carry with them in the next, and again, so on and so forth, right? So this is where we start to see culture shifts, whether it's rock music, whether it's hip hop, whether it's like trap, whether it's now like, in my opinion, some of these Sabrina Carpenter or the Pink Pony Club, Chaperone, like you get these female artists that are talking about sex. Like Sabrina Carpenter, I love her. She's great. I saw her in concert with my wife. She was really talented. But all of her music is about fucking and sex and all of this shit. And like, you have to wonder, is this intentional? Whether or not she like is a great artist, that's undeniable. But is her getting to the position she's in maybe somebody recognizing the type of things that she, can sing about and how well she can sing, knowing she'll be a sensation. And this is the type of content we want our young adults to be consuming. And again, like, you just see that over time. And I don't know if this bleeds into whether it's organic, whether this is progress, or this is oriented into a way that we can continue to push the younger generation to more and more explicit content in order for the norms of society, in order for everything else around that cultural element to be able to be formed as well, right? Like, if everybody was the same temperament from the 1960s, right? And there was not a whole lot of movement on the culture front. Good luck trying to change anything else. But when you can start to interact with one generation to the next, and you can kind of slowly push onto that next generation new changes, whether it's technology, whether it's business, whether it's the way the world works, then it's a little easier. So that's, I don't know, the way that my mind kind of works with that. Number 11, to keep people everywhere from deciding their own destinies by means of one created crisis after another, then managing such crises. This will confuse and demoralize the population. Apathy on a massive scale. 1991. Like, I read that and it was just so, it just hit home, man. Like, how many crises is it in a single month? Assassination attempts, natural disasters, call it any number of pandemics, any number of things that, like, you have maybe a week to focus on, and then it's on to the next. And, like, all of it is negative. And then back to, like, the confusion and the demoralization. And again, back to the guy with the fucking mask. Like, were we shown the mask so that we would feel demoralized and confused? And just, like, the apathy part is so on point. Everybody is apathetic. Nobody thinks that we can make a change, especially after Massey gets fucking bought. Like, when you watch that, you're just like, man, so elections really don't matter at all. And it's like, what are we to do? And that's the feeling that I think they want to curate in us. So it's crazy. Again, 1991. Number 12, to introduce new cults and continue to boost already functioning cults, which includes music, filthy, degenerate Mick Jaggers. Again, I don't agree with everything that's in here, but it's hilarious. But he did say the Tavistock Institute, which is basically kind of the orchestrating group that planned out a lot of this. I have yet to look into it. I want to finish the book. But that's kind of what I was saying, is like, you continue to push different pieces of culture in directions that you want it to go. Number 13, to continue to build up the cult of Christian fundamentalism, which will be misused to strengthen the Zionist state of Israel, God's chosen people, and by donating very substantial amounts of money to what they mistakenly believe is a religious cause. 1991. Dude, I didn't even know anything about a relationship with Israel or Zionism up until 2023, right? After the whole October 7th thing happened and the war in Gaza started, I was like, what the fuck is going on here? And then, like, now I would say a vast majority of Americans are against our relationship with Israel. And the one that isn't is evangelical Christians. They are so bought in. They are so on board with the mission, because it is those who curse Israel will be cursed by God, or whatever, right? Like, and so it's so interesting. 35 fucking years ago, this guy is saying we're going to spend a bunch of money, we're going to send it over to Israel, and they're going to trick evangelicals. Like, tell me, like, that one alone, out of these 21 points, if you just told me that one alone, I'm believing the rest of these. Because this one came true unequivocally. So it's just fucking crazy. Number 14. This one, again, I don't think happened. But I guess you can make the argument that Islam has spread across the globe. Again, back to the immigration thing, but he says to press for the spread of religious cults such as the Muslim Brotherhood, Muslim fundamentalism, and the Sikhs. I don't know. But it would be like, essentially is the movement of Islam in radical terrorists, I suppose. And you could see maybe Hezbollah, you could see Hamas. Again, these aren't good terrorists. These are not good groups, right? So maybe you could see something into that. But I guess I didn't have a lot of data to back up that claim. Number 15, again, this one didn't really take place. And so maybe I don't understand it correctly, because this one I was kind of trying to struggle to understand. To export religious liberation ideas around the world so as to undermine all existing religions, but more especially the Christian religion. And the way that he describes the example, I believe, was like some nuns that were in Costa Rica, and they went to persuade the public on some very Marxist or communist-like ideas via a lens of Christianity. And so I don't know. I don't exactly know if I agree with his framing on that. I don't know exactly understand what he's getting at. The one caveat that I'll give is the whole turning point faith. Like, we have seen religion being used to push policy, and it's not from a genuine place, right? So it's interesting. Number 16, to cause a total collapse of the world's economy and engender a total political chaotic world. Straight for moose, man. Fuck it, dude. That's on point. On point. Political chaos. What's more chaotic than a transition to a new reserve currency, new superpower, a global potential war, and then the Strait of Hormuz closure? Like, that is an economic disaster. I mean, we're a little bit insulated. We're going to feel it for sure. African countries are going to suffer famines. You're going to have Asian countries suffer blackouts. You're going to have European countries also probably not do very well. It's unfortunate, and this is exactly what he's predicting. It was one sentence, right? 17, to take control of all foreign and domestic policy of the United States. Enough said, man. Look at the fucking lobbying apparatus that we have. Money in politics is probably the scourge of the earth. It's the only thing that is keeping this group in power, is the fact that they can buy that power. You look at Palantir, you look at Elon, you look at Miriam Adelson, you look at the pharmaceutical companies, you look at everybody who has something to gain from policies, and it's not yours. 18, to give the fullest support to supranational institutions such as the UN, IMF, BIS, World Court. Now, in my mind, I think this has moved to more of a capitalistic viewpoint of BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, who own like 80% of the S&P 500, who are international. So when something, for instance, happens in Ukraine and they destroy a bunch of buildings and property, or maybe in Gaza, they contract with BlackRock to rebuild it. So I don't know. It's all a big fucking system, and they all work together in order to create crises, to profit off of those crises and build the world back in their image. And this all stems from like the WEF, the World Health Organization, which they wanted that pandemic treaty, which is very similar to overtaking a lot of sovereign nations' power. A lot of them didn't agree to it, thank God, but still, nonetheless, they tried. Number 19, penetrate and subvert all governments and work from within them to destroy the sovereign integrity of nations represented by them. We have a National Endowment for Democracy fund worth $300 million just to do that, to go out and find political enemies of the U.S. that we'd like to overthrow. We did it in Ukraine back in, 2014? We've messed around in all sorts of different governments around the Middle East, and who knows how we've done it here locally. So, organize a worldwide terrorist apparatus. Now, they try to do this with ISIS, if you remember. And, there's, some actions around the world that are terrorist-like, but not that are globally pushed, right? In my thoughts is Mossad. But no, I think it'll be Project Bluebeam. Right? You have a worldwide threat, which could be aliens, which I feel like we're gearing up for. And then number 21, last but not least, take control of education in America with the intent and purpose of utterly and completely destroying it. Dude, I mean, math and reading are all-time lows right now for Americans. And it's really sad. Like, it doesn't take much brain power for you to look around and realize people don't have any. And that's not to slight anybody. Like, at the end of the day, like, we are abandoned as a populace. Like, nobody cares about us outside of us. If you have some really good teachers who are passionate about trying to educate people, that's amazing. But there's so many out there that don't give a fuck. It's just a job. And I don't blame them, because, like, I know somebody who half of her class were immigrants that didn't speak English, and they all got passed on to the next grade. Like, they couldn't even learn, and they still got passed on. It's not about anything, again, but money. Unfortunately, the incentive structures aren't there, and not only that, but like public school, I think you can get a lot from if you have great parents that are trying to push you in a direction to have a good education. But so many parents are working to the bone, third shift, have no fucking time, and they let their kids run wild, and those kids are increasingly becoming more and more dangerous. I know it sounds crazy, but like, specifically where I live, you can see some gangs of like 16 to 19-year-olds that are doing awful things all over the place. Lighting cars on fire, lighting buildings on fire, all that type of shit. And again, I don't blame dude. Like, nobody's looking out for anybody here. So it's like, dog eat dog world, right? So, but it is apparent that education has fell off a cliff. While most other nations around the globe have also suffered from an educational loss, which is maybe indicative of social media or some of the other distractions that are around us, we've suffered very bad to the extent it's the worst scores that we've ever had. So I don't exactly know where this leaves us, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of the day, like, I do my best because I'm no different than anybody. I try to keep up with a lot of this simply because, like, I'd rather know it than not know it versus the ignorance is bliss, but I understand the other lens. So if you enjoy the podcast, again, send it to a friend, rate it 5 stars on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube. If you can support, $5 or $3 on Patreon helps me, be a little bit more strategic with my time, as well as be able to invest in, tools and things to make this podcast better. But at the end of the day, I guess my message is to go touch grass and read this book and follow me on RantPod. But I appreciate it, and toodaloo, motherfuckers. Beep, 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 beep.